Thank you. And now the Alden is pleased to welcome your MC for tonight's proceedings, Rip Sullivan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I hope our sound system is working and you can hear me. Can you hear me back there? Great. Well, welcome to our forum. We apologize for our slightly late beginning. We know you're all interested to be here, though, so we're going to power through for the full 2 hours that we've planned, but I'm guessing we'll be able to hold your attention here fairly easily. Thank you for being here at tonight's Candidates Forum. The primary is approaching, and the sponsors of this event wanted to make sure that there was plenty of opportunity for voters out there to learn about these candidates. So we hope by the end of this evening you will feel as if you've learned a lot about these candidates. We've got an interesting, what we think is an interesting approach to this evening. My name is Rip Sullivan, and I'm going to be your MC for the evening. The event tonight is jointly sponsored by the Drainsville and Providence District Democratic Committees and the Fairfax County Young Democrats. We're being video recorded by Brian Kelleher, and following the forum, you all saw a sign out front. You will be allowed and encouraged to participate in a straw poll, which will be conducted in the Stedman room right across the lobby. We'll go through the rules in a moment, but some of you I know were hoping to be filling out cards. We've chosen a format that will not include audience questions for this evening, but I promise you will be more than satisfied with the questioning this evening. I want to recognize a couple of, at least one I know. Bob, are you here? Bob Brink. I want to recognize Bob Brink, our delegate. And are there any other electeds here, or anybody who wants to be an elected? So let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted and very honored to have a special guest with us this evening to moderate our forum. Over the past 3 decades, Glenn Kessler has covered Congress, the White House, and the State Department, including 9 years as the Washington Post's diplomatic correspondent. He now writes the Post's fact-checker column, in which he probes and examines the statements of politicians, trying to discern the truth behind the rhetoric. If the statement falls short, which sometimes happens, Glenn explains why, and he awards as many as 4 Pinocchios to the offending party. Glenn is a resident of McLean, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and the author of The Confidant, Condoleezza Rice, and the Creation of the Bush Legacy, which I'm sure is available on Amazon and maybe even at old-fashioned bookstores. I'm betting that all of you, like me, eagerly anticipate and learn from and are even entertained by Glenn's Pinocchios in the Washington Post. So please welcome Glenn Kessler.
Thank you, Rip. A few minutes ago, our 6 candidates drew for their starting order and their position. We have divided the candidates in 2 groups of 3, and this will allow for a greater variety of questions. The candidates are going to be allowed 1 minute for opening statements and 1 minute for answers to my questions. Just prior to the closing statements, the candidates will be allowed 1 minute to answer any question that they were not asked, because I'm going to give different questions to the different panels. And I will be asking follow-up questions throughout the forum, and if necessary, maybe even award a Pinocchio or 2. Finally, candidates may have 2 minutes for their closing statements. And as Rip noted, we will not be taking questions from the audience. We ask that the audience applaud at the end of each candidate's opening and closing statements, but not after each response to any of my questions. So let's begin with the opening statements.
Bill Ewell, I think, is first.
Thank you very much. And again, my name is Bill Ewell. I serve as the mayor of the city of Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm honored to be here this evening participating in this candidates forum. I want to thank Greg Brandon, the chair of the Drainsville Democratic Committee and the Providence Democratic Committee for hosting this and having us here. But I just want you to know that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I say that simply because we must elect someone to replace the hardworking Jim Moran who can get the job done in the gridlock that's going on in Congress so that we can move this country forward. I'm someone that has the ability, the skills to do just that, and I have proven responsibilities in my years in politics in the city of Alexandria just doing that. When we had a power plant in the city that was polluting the environment, we pushed to shut that down. when we were trying to address affordable housing needs in the new development in Potomac Yard. The fire chief said, we want to build a new fire station. I said, let's put 64 units of affordable housing above that fire station. I have a record of performance. Thank you.
Let me, before Laverne goes next, I should have warned you all about the lousy buzzer we've got. I hope we didn't give anybody a heart attack there. And I'll apologize to the candidates. It is harsher than we had hoped for, but it's all we've got this evening. So 1 minute, Laverne.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having us. As an African American and a woman, against the odds, I've been able to live and realize the American dream because of education and economic opportunities in this district. My parents migrated from farms in Tappahannock, Virginia. They came here, got good blue-collar jobs, raised a family of 5 kids, achieved economic stability. We lived in subsidized housing, but they worked hard, and I was able to work my way through college, the first in my family to graduate. My late husband was able to get a loan after military experience and start a company here, Technology Applications. For 17 years, we were able to hire over 400 people. Then we sold the company in '93 and were able to give back philanthropically to this community. I want everyone to have those type of opportunities. That's why I'm running for Congress to represent you.
Adam, I think you're next.
Thank you. Thank you, Drainsville Democrats, Providence Democrats, Fairfax YDs, Greg and Rip. I'm Adam Eben, and I always knew I was different. Even at age 5, I knew I was different because at the flagpole in kindergarten, the kids chanted at me, Nixon, 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 and I chanted back, Humphrey, Humphrey, Humphrey. Now, there's another way I'm different. A lot of my colleagues on the stage tonight are using progressive slogans in this race, and I'd say we're all progressives. We have an aggressive progressive, a proven principled progressive, my fellow co-chair, the Progressive Caucus, but if it's easier for you to distinguish me, just call me a liberal. I'm not the flashiest, I'm not the loudest, I'm not going to make the loftiest promises tonight, but I am an effective legislator who shares your values. I passed progressive legislations in a hostile and dysfunctional Richmond, which has prepared me for Congress. I'm going to pass progressive legislation in a hostile and dysfunctional Washington. I'm not just running to be your congressman, I'm running to be an effective congressman.
Don, you're next.
Thank you. Growing up, I was taught that we were each put on this earth to build something larger than ourselves and to serve others, and that's why I'm running for Congress. 16 million American children live in poverty. 10 million Americans are out of work, and our unemployment rate among young people is almost 17%. And the gap between rich and poor is growing while our middle class is shrinking. I want to go to Congress to fight for these families. We need a new American economy based on the deepest possible investments in human capital. Universal pre-K, the Common Core state standards, scarce high school dropouts, and affordable college educations for all. We need to preserve and improve Obamacare. We must pass common sense gun safety laws. And we still have to address the crisis of climate change. That's why I support a progressive carbon tax, the single most effective solution to control greenhouse gases. I'm running to work on these issues. I look forward to our discussion of these issues tonight.
Patrick.
Well, good evening, Drainsville Dems, Providence Dems, and Fairfax Young Democrats. Thank you for sponsoring, and thank you for everyone for coming out tonight. Glenn and Rip, I want to thank you for moderating tonight's proceedings. My name is Patrick Hope. I'm a delegate in the Virginia General Assembly. I represent part of Arlington County and have since 2009. I'm the founder of the Virginia Progressive Caucus, and I started the Progressive Caucus to really call out Tea Party Republicans and create a mechanism even within the Democratic Party to make sure that Democrats who say that they're Democrats actually vote like Democrats. Now, we have many great candidates here tonight. In fact, every single one of the people that are up here tonight are qualified to be your next member of Congress. We agree on so much. Tonight, I want to focus on some of the differences between us and to help you make an informed decision on June the 10th. And of course, I look forward to the questions, and I hope to earn your vote on June the 10th. Thank you so much.
Mark, your turn.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Mark Levine. I used to be the chief lawyer for Congressman Barney Frank, and I am known as the aggressive progressive because I fight for the things that other Democrats say can't be done. First bill I ever wrote was to protect victims of domestic violence. They said it couldn't be done because I wasn't serving in the legislature, but I wrote the bill. It passed unanimously into law. I worked for Barney Frank, and he had a faith-based initiative. And that was something, George Bush had the faith-based initiative, and that would have allowed religious discrimination. He had all the votes he needed to pass the legislation. They said we couldn't stop it. I went door to door, senator to senator, finally reached Hillary Clinton, persuaded her to change her mind, and we killed that legislation. I formed the marriage equality movement. They said it couldn't be done, and we started a nationwide movement. It's going to occur next year. So don't let them tell you you can't get universal health care, or clean the Potomac River, or punish Wall Street thieves, or combat climate change. We can do all these things. The only things that can't be done are the things we don't try to do. Thanks.
All right, very good. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask different questions to the panels, going back and forth. And the first question, Laverne will start. Then next time I come to you, it'll be Don, we'll start, and we'll just go in that order. So we'll start with this panel here. Any large piece of legislation turns out to have some problems that need to be addressed. And Democrats currently in Congress often say they want to fix the Affordable Care Act. Please name one specific thing you would like to do to fix the law.
I'd like to fix the website that started it so more people can sign up. The things that are in it, I'm in agreement with, and I think most Republicans are. Making sure that women no longer pay more just because they're women to get insurance, having kids to stay on till they're 26 on their parents' insurance, and certainly not having pre-existing conditions. So those are the things that I think Republicans would agree with and Democrats agree with. So I don't see any part of it right now that needs to be fixed. I would like to listen to the Republicans who have some recommendations instead of just saying repeal it, tell us something substantive that they would like to do that would make it better. It needs to be, we need affordable health care for all, and some people still can't even afford affordable care.
You know, I'm a strong supporter of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm so pleased that roughly 8 million people have signed up for the private insurance, and roughly 5 million have been covered by the expansion of Medicaid. And I would like to make it better and fix it. And one thing that jumps out at me is the fact that many employees don't qualify for the Affordable Care Act if they work less than 30 hours a week. I have an acquaintance, I wouldn't call him a friend, who runs a bunch of golf courses in the south of this country. And I talked to him recently. He said he reduced the hours of 600 of his workers, basically minimum wage workers, to 29 hours a week so that he didn't have to hassle with the Affordable Care Act for them. Basically, he was putting them into poverty 2 times over. This is one of the things Republicans talked about early on, is that employers will cut back the hours. You know, I served as ambassador in Switzerland for 4 years. One of the very interesting things they did is if you work part-time, say 30 hours a week, you're a 75% employee or a 50% employee, and then you get 75 or 50% of the benefits.
The problem with going third in one of these panels is you can't, if you have the same answer as someone, you look like you're following. But I do have a similar answer. So the Affordable Care Act, besides the website, one of the problems, and I'll give you a specific, in Virginia with adjunct college professors, we've had professors who've had their courses cut so that they can be classified as less than 29 hours a week. I led a vote in the state Senate, forced a vote in Governor McDonnell's budget, where he said that no part-time state employee could work more than 29 hours a week. So similar to Ambassador Beyer, I find that troubling. And I would mandate that you couldn't cut part-time and full-time workers who are in those hours now to 29 hours a week to avoid giving them health insurance.
Just to pick up, are you saying you would eliminate the employer requirement?
No, the opposite. I would say that employers could not cut the hours in order to work their way around the employer requirement.
I see. Okay. Well, because for this panel, I would like to bring up the employer mandate, because some have pointed to the fact that workers are deemed to be full-time workers once they work more than 30 hours a week. And there was a new study released just in the past week by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that found that eliminating the employer mandate completely would have only a marginal impact on the level of the uninsured. So is that something that should be changed, to eliminate the employer mandate and see what happens there? You guys have touched on the problem that there's this point in the law at 30 hours, and there is some evidence that some employers are cutting people back to part-time because of that.
Mark?
Yeah, Mark.
I don't believe health care should be tied to employment at all. I mean, that's why I support Medicare for all. That's why I support universal care. It doesn't make any sense to me that if you've got one employer and she's great, but she has a chronic illness, that they may say, well, I'm not going to hire her. I'm going to hire that mediocre guy because he's really healthy. So to me, the real problem with the Affordable Care Act is it doesn't go far enough. We've got the 40th largest life expectancy in the world. Now, we're the richest country on earth, and yet all these nations live longer than we do because they all have universal care, and they pay less than half the cost. My opponents here are talking about the Affordable Care Act. I agree it's a step forward. I agree it's a step in the right direction. But until we get universal care, I'm not satisfied. It works all over the world, and we should have it here. There shouldn't be an employer mandate.
Just a reminder, we are trying to hold applause for this stage, all right? Trying to keep things moving.
Glenn, I think I understand your question as to whether we would support the elimination of the employer mandate. And I think what the study reveals is that a large number of Americans already get their insurance through their employer. And they're doing it, the employers are offering it because that's what competition has required. Now, I do think a lot of them do give insurance right now because of the mandate. And we certainly would not want to pull that out because I disagree with the study. I think more people would get less insurance. And the idea is to push more people to be insured. But the fact of the matter is, this employer mandate, employers are doing this because it makes good economic sense. Their competitors are doing it, and it's part of your compensation. But I would not eliminate the employer mandate at all. And I would say to you, the only problem that I see that we need to fix in the Affordable Care Act, the biggest problem, is it doesn't go far enough. 20 million Americans are still uninsured, and they're not covered by the employer mandate. So keep the employer mandate, but bring those 20 million Americans back into the healthcare system.
I would have the same response. I don't think we need to eliminate the employer mandate. Someone who's been in business and an employer, and whether mandated or not, I just think it's the right thing to do, that you take care of your employees, you provide them with the benefits that they so rightly deserve. And certainly the cost of insurance has gone up tremendously, and that's all the more reason why we've pushed for something close to universal health care, but the Affordable Care Act. But I would actually advocate for more expansion so that we can get more people covered and make certain that the opportunities for those who currently don't have insurance have it. I served on the board of directors of the NOAA Health System for 9 years, and just yesterday talking to a doctor at a reception event that we all attended, and this doctor is just worried to death about her practice, but the mere fact that her customers can't even come in to receive care anymore because of the cost.
All right, thank you. Back to this panel. The budget deficit is declining, but it is still relatively high. Many budget experts say that action must be taken now to prepare programs such as Social Security or Medicare for the retirement of the baby boom generation. What specific steps should be taken to ensure the long-term survival of those programs?
Yeah, I agree with the President that we need to look outside simple answers like raising retirement age or lifting caps. I think, obviously, we want to protect the 65. We want to protect Medicare in every way we possibly can. But I think what's important is to look at the larger budget. We have 10 million Americans out of work right now. Let's put them back to work. Let's have a legal path to immigration and put all those people back to work. Let's get this economy growing again. I think the first quarter it grew at 0.1%. Let's get it growing at 3 and 4% on a basis. That will pull down the budget deficit, and that will allow general revenues that help the plump up whatever difference there is in Social Security and in Medicare.
Thank you. What we need to do is raise the cap on Social Security taxes. We need to raise the taxes on millionaires. We need to stop the Ryan budget. The Ryan budget would end Medicare and Social Security as we know it. It repeals Obamacare. It raises taxes on the middle class. It's the exact opposite of where we want to go. To propose to cut taxes on millionaires and billionaires while raising them on the middle class is irresponsible and outrageous. We need to fight it. It cuts education, infrastructure, and clean energy investments. To keep this economy moving, we should be increasing education, increasing spending on infrastructure, increasing clean energy investments, and increase job training. This is the Ryan budget has the wrong priorities, and reversing that course and doing the exact opposite is where we need to be.
I think our budget should continue to reflect what our values are. Part of our values are taking care of our senior citizens. Our values are having equal opportunities for all. Number one, I think we need to really look at tax reform. It needs to be more equitable. We are losing the middle class into poverty. We do not have enough jobs. Our economy is not healthy enough. If we concentrate on equal pay for equal work, that puts more into family households. People can afford to take care of themselves. So tax reform is where we have to look, bringing more jobs back here, infrastructure jobs, putting people to work is what we need to be looking at. But the values that we have of taking care of the least of these, having a safety net, we must still continue to do that.
All right, Bill, just to follow up, you mentioned raising the cap on Social Security. Are you talking about the cap on wages currently, like at about I think it's at $107,000 when people start paying into Social Security? Would you just raise it all the way to a certain level, or would you eliminate it completely? You would eliminate it completely. All right. On this side, now some Democrats argue that Social Security benefits should be increased. Others, such as President Obama, have pushed for changing the cost of living index as a way to reduce costs in the long term. Where do you stand on this? And if you want to boost benefits, how specifically would you pay for them?
Well, I mean, I oppose chain CPI. I oppose raising the age of retirement for Social Security. Look, Social Security is not even our biggest problem. We need to be worried more about our Medicare trust fund. The Social Security trust fund is solvent until 2033 right now, and at that point, it'll still be 75% funded. But I do agree lifting the payroll tax will help, and that will bring in more revenue. And if we start doing what Senator Evans said, we need to start taxing millionaires and billionaires. No disrespect to anyone up here on this panel, but everyone needs to start paying their fair share and start investing more in our economy. We need to start creating more jobs, and that other jobs, that will generate more revenue for the Social Security Trust Fund. So let me tell you something. The Social Security Trust Fund, if we do those things, that will make it solvent for future generations. I oppose chain CPI. There's too many people living on disability that would be hardly affected by that, and I would oppose any type of cuts, and I pledge as your next member of Congress to never support any cuts to beneficiaries.
Just a reminder, folks, just a reminder, we want to keep moving. Bill?
Yes, first and foremost, I have, and you may say, well, you don't look it, but I have more than 83 years of experience dealing with budgets, from 10 years on the school board, 21 years on the city council, 13 years on WMATA, the transit system. So I have a degree in accounting and business, and so budgets is what I do 24/7, 365 days a year. Having said all that, the way we solve our budget deficit situation is to grow the economy, create jobs, and that's what I want to go to Congress to do. I think one way we create jobs is to fund the Highway Transportation Act. That bill is scheduled to expire at the end of October. 600,000 more jobs can be created if we were to do that to address our infrastructure needs, bridges, roads, sewers, and everything else. That is critical. When you put more people to work, that helps to they pay more taxes. That helps to put more money into the Social Security fund. Therefore, we don't have to make any of these changes that are being suggested.
Should we expand Social Security? Yes, we should. No one who works 40 hours a week their entire life should live in poverty. How do we pay for it? We simply make millionaires and billionaires pay the same rate everyone else pays. So when we lift the cap, what does that mean? 94% of Americans pay a full 6.2% into Social Security because they make $119,000 or less. If you make $1 million a year, you pay less than 1%. You make $1 billion a year, you pay less than 1,000th of 1%. So Donald Trump's janitor is paying far more as a percentage into Social Security than Donald Trump is. That's not fair. And by fixing it, and this would only affect 6% of Americans, by fixing it, we not only make Social Security trust funds solvent throughout the remainder of the horizon the Congressional Budget Office looks at, which is 75 years, we actually have money left over. Money so that if you're taking care under the Family Medical Leave Act, for example, for a sick loved one, you could get a little bit of money so you don't have to decide whether you go back to your job or wait to take care of a sick parent. The money is there, and all we're doing is asking everyone to pay the same rate.
You know, just to follow up on that, one reason why Franklin Roosevelt had that cap was that he didn't want millionaires and billionaires to think that Social Security was a welfare program. And that, so there is a concern among some analysts that if you were to lift the cap, that you would lose support among the wealthiest, who also happen to be people that contribute a lot to political campaigns, and therefore you would end up with less support for Social Security. So those of you who have advocated this, is that a concern? Should that be a concern?
First of all, that's why I want to get big money out of politics, because I don't want millionaires and billionaires to determine who wins these races. That's very important to me. Look, only 6% make above that income. It affects a very limited number of people, and all we're asking them to do is pay the same percentage everyone else is. This isn't even a progressive tax. It's a regressive tax. I'm not saying Donald Trump should pay a higher percentage than his janitor in the system. I'm saying he should pay the same amount into the system. Social Security, it's important to remember, is not a retirement program. It's not. It's an insurance program. It's not designed to, you got 401ks, you got IRAs for retirement. Social Security is designed to protect the people who need it. It's for disability. It's if parents die and they leave young children, it's there for you. If you live too long, Social Security is there for you. And if you make a bad investment in the stock market, Social Security is there for you. If you're a millionaire and you invest it all in Enron or one of Bernie Madoff's stocks and you lose it all, guess what? Social Security will be there for you. So as long as we remember it's an insurance program, and with pensions and everything else not existing anymore, we need that insurance program. It's not a welfare program, it's insurance.
I don't know if you wanted to follow up on that, because you also talked about lifting the cap.
I mean, I could say quite simply, Social Security should be treated like Medicare. You pay into the system, it should be there for you no matter what. I mean, you could be Bill Gates and you could lose all your money in the stock market. I mean, that's what Republicans really want to do with Social Security. They want to privatize it, and then where we'll be. But that certainly could happen to someone out there. We need to make sure that Social Security is there for everyone. You pay into it, it should be treated like every other program that we have.
Okay. Let's turn to some foreign policy here. The panel over here, and I guess Adam would start. The administration is actively seeking an agreement with Iran that it says represents a diplomatic solution for Tehran's nuclear program. But Israel says that any possible agreement would leave Iran as a threshold nuclear power. If the administration says it has achieved an acceptable deal, would you vote to lift sanctions on Iran despite Israel's concerns?
Yes. We need to keep nuclear weapons out of Israel out of Iran at all costs. And the United States can negotiate on our own. We don't need to get the approval of Israel to negotiate. So simply, yes. A nuclear Iran is a horrible and unthinkable situation. But I'm glad that Iran is at the table, that the sanctions we put in place have worked, and that they're negotiating. I'm not counting on Iran easily negotiating, but when we have an agreement that we favor, that's when we conclude.
Yeah.
I feel that Iran, number one, we need to reduce our dependency on foreign oil. That's the first thing across the board. But if we have an agreement and we feel that they have lived up to their part, then we should lessen the sanctions. Smart power is what we need to always be going for. We need to always make sure that we are doing the diplomatic response. If we need third parties to intervene on our behalf or agree with us around certain issues, we need to make sure we're not the only ones and we're going it alone. So we need to make sure that as Americans that we are standing tough, but always using smart power first. And sanctions is a part of smart power. So if we give them, we have to be in a position to lift them as well.
Yes, I absolutely would support the president, but it's not just the president. It's the P5+1, Germany, France, China, Russia, that's been part of all this, and the IAEA that's been doing the inspections. Right now, the 6-month deal is based on 3 things: on reducing the number of centrifuges they can do to build nuclear weapons, on reducing the stockpile of 20% enriched uranium to 5%, and to allow IAEA inspections, which are happening. We spent years trying to get Iran to the table. We devastated their economy with U.S., UN, and EU enhanced sanctions. Now that we finally have them at the table, and essentially Rouhani won that election last year by promising the Iranian people that he would get a deal. The Iranians say again and again they want peaceful nuclear power. Israel reasonably is concerned that they not turn the peaceful nuclear power into nuclear weapons. But if the P5+1 can make a deal, we should respect it and count our blessings and continue to inspect and then move forward.
Right. I was trying to lay out there will be a tension when that agreement comes forward, if it does come forward, because there are going to be some that say that the United States cannot trust Iran to live up to any kind of agreement. So do you think that it's really possible to trust them?
Well, I think the trust but verify has to be there. And I think this is very good public policy and foreign policy on Israel's part to draw as hard a line as they can in order to force the U.S., Russia, Germany, et cetera, to be as diligent as possible. Israel cannot stand a nuclear-armed Iran. We respect that. Nor, by the way, can Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the world. This would be the first country ever to sign the non-proliferation treaty that would have broken it. But I think that the trust but verify is exactly what we want. We even know that if we do military strikes or that Israel does military strikes, you only push back, best estimate, their capability by 2-3 years. We don't take it away. Mm-hmm. So we need a diplomatic solution. And if the president and the P5+1, or the 3+3 as they say in Europe, can do that, then I think we need to move forward.
All right. To this panel, both President Obama and former Secretary of State Clinton have pointed to the opening to Burma as one of their foreign policy achievements. But legislation pending in the House currently, supported by both Democrats and Republicans, would halt military-to-military cooperation unless the Burmese government takes steps to halt the persecution of the Rohingya, which, as you know, is becoming a human rights crisis. If elected to Congress, would you support this bill despite the administration's opposition?
That's a very good question, and let me just simply say that with regards to Iran, I agree that if the opportunity was there for negotiations to reach a settlement in terms of negotiation, I would lift the sanctions on them as well. But with this particular question, I would have to disagree. As much as I love the president and have supported him on a lot of things, this is one that I would have some concerns about continuing to support him because we must protect the people of Burma for their human rights and everything, and I would not rush to judgment on that. I would also like to offer the fact that I have traveled a lot throughout the world, and to Saudi Arabia, recently I was in Taiwan and Turkey and other countries, and so I think that I have experience to provide the diplomacy and everything to be more effective to address these types of situations as they arise as a member of the Congress, and I look forward to having that opportunity.
Absolutely, I would support the legislation, and I don't care if the president is opposed to it. My job as your representative is not necessarily to do what President Obama wants. It's to do what I and you, as people I represent, believe is right. The United States has always taken a stand for human rights around the world. At least those of us that want the U.S. to do so have done so. We've also had a terrible practice of supporting dictators, and I'm tired of it. I don't care whether it's Egypt or it used to be Panama or Philippines or anywhere else. we have to be the people who supports human rights. We cannot put trade interests ahead of people that are suffering. If we are not the people out there supporting human rights, then suddenly no one knows who the good guys are, right? The whole world looks to us to defend minorities that are being persecuted and not to support dictators. And when we do support dictators, it ends up biting us and coming back with blowback. So no, I would support the legislation because I do not want to support a repressive regime.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, the world is watching, and we have got to stand up and make sure that we stand, the United States of America, supporting human rights. And so I agree with that. Now, I said in my opening statement that I think that we need to start pointing out some differences. And I want to point out one difference, unrelated to this question, that I think is paramount. I think we're all Democrats here, but there's different kinds of Democrats up here. And I know, Don, when you were Lieutenant Governor, one of your crowning achievements, what you've said, is welfare reform. One of the things that I differ with you on welfare reform is, a key component of that is child care assistance. Well, you know that we have in Fairfax County, because Fairfax County, first of all, because welfare is so important, we really got to make sure that people are working, that they have that child care. But there's 4,000 kids in Fairfax that are on that waiting list because it didn't have a funding mechanism. Democrats should not cut deals with George Allen and expect to have this kind of different result.
All right, I'm not sure how we moved from Burma to welfare and Fairfax, but
Verbal dexterity.
yes, I guess. All right, I'm going to move to another foreign policy question here, and maybe Don can use part of his answer to respond on welfare reform.
You think? Laverne's first.
Oh, right. Anyway, here's my question. The Obama administration says Egypt is on its way back to democracy and wants to resume military aid. Do you agree with the administration's position, or would you seek to block aid unless Egypt takes additional steps to release political prisoners and foster a more open society?
Again, I want us to live up to what we say that we're going to do. Egypt is an important part of the world. Their relationship with us is important, but I stand with the president and would agree that we should move forward and honor the commitments that we've made and what Egypt says that they will do.
I think it is complicated. My instinct is that we blockade, but not. I've been very concerned in the last couple of weeks of what they've done in Egypt with the mass convictions, basically without trial, and with the mass condemnations of death, without individual trial, without defense. And I think we have to stand up and say this is wrong. There has to be a consequence. We must punish the Egyptians for it. But I also think we have to be aware of the role that Egypt plays in Israel's security, the role that we have with Egypt in just trying to make sure that the Middle East is peaceful. Not oil, but human rights across all that. I think that we need to make a very strong statement now. And so my instinct is to say, yes, let's block this support. While they're, one of the reasons why we looked the other way, which I didn't disagree when they ousted Morsi, was because Morsi was democratically elected even though he was overthrowing the Constitution. So we said, well, maybe the dictators will be better. Doesn't seem like they're better.
I can't support new aid to Egypt while there's human rights violations by the interim government. It's wrong to stifle free speech. It's outrageous to detain and imprison journalists. We should be calling for the release of political prisoners, especially the Al Jazeera journalists. Freedom of speech is fundamental for democracy, and the path that Egypt is heading down is dangerous. What we should be doing is setting up a path for increased exchanges with Egypt, encouraging good behavior, but not by giving aid for this kind of bad and outrageous behavior.
I mean, the one, just as a follow-up, one thing about that aid is it is tied to the Israeli-Egyptian peace deal. And there is a concern that if you terminate that aid, that, suddenly that peace deal goes up in smoke. So how do you balance that concern?
Aid can be suspended. It can be conditioned on improvements. but to offer it without improvements in the current situation is not acceptable. I mean, people who imprison journalists should not get unrestricted aid.
Okay. To this panel, in the confrontation with Russia over Ukraine, President Obama has adopted a policy of steadily increasing sanctions in response to Russian actions. But many in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, say his efforts have been inadequate and are pushing for tougher, quicker sanctions. Where do you stand on this?
I supported the moment the Russians went into Crimea, the toughest sanctions. Completely. I mean, we have to get our allies on board. We've got to get Germany on board. Obviously, that's important to Russian trade. But I said it publicly on television. I said that if we don't do the toughest sanctions against Russia, including freezing all bank accounts, including basically a suspension of trade, then they're going to go into eastern Ukraine next. And I wish I'd been wrong, but 2 weeks later, there we are. And then we don't do enough in eastern Ukraine, and it moves to Odessa. We have to take a strong stand early. One of the best ways to avoid the use of military force is to use sanctions in a powerful way early. Sanctions can be very powerful. They brought Iran to the negotiating table. They ended apartheid in South Africa. I think President Obama has been way too slow, way too weak, and I got to tell you, that's why Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, our NATO allies, are very nervous. And if they do something in NATO, well, that means it's a worldwide war. So we have to use sanctions now so it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, the situation in Ukraine is clearly shaping up to be a civil war. It's one that we should all take very seriously and be concerned about. I know the president is starting to really tighten the screws, but I do agree with Mark. It should have been much, much sooner. I would support more stricter sanctions, economic ones. We should look at not just at bank accounts, freezing assets, but we should also look at mining. We should look at oil and gas, things that really hit them very hard. Now, I know the concern is that I think a lot of people in Europe is that this would hurt them a lot more than us, but I think that we've really got to be tough with Putin. He can no longer be a bully in Ukraine, and I agree with Mark. I mean, he's not going to stop unless we stop him. And so I agree with those in Congress that are calling for tougher sanctions. I've been critical that the president has not been strong enough on this, and I hope we do get tougher because it's something that is making a lot of people nervous.
I echo those same comments and thoughts and certainly believe that we should have tougher sanctions. I think one of the problems is that, there were years ago the United States was viewed around the world as being the 800-pound gorilla. We stick out our chests and pound it, and everybody, was afraid of us. But I think as I've traveled to other parts of the world, and people have come to realize and respect who we are as Americans, that it's not really the people that the American people that they're afraid of. It's how some of the things that we do as a government that impacts them and concerns them. But one of the things that the United States must finally get back to doing and being is a respected, honest broker. Because we've lost that capability. And that's one of the things that I would advocate for as a congressperson, but also working with the president and the White House to make certain that whatever we do to help the rest of the world solve their problems, that we do it in an honest broker fashion and where we have respect.
All right, thank you. Let's see. This panel, the administration long resisted designating Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization, largely out of deference to the Nigerian government, which believed it would only give enhanced status to the organization. Was that the right call, or do you agree with those in Congress that the administration's reluctance was an error?
It's complicated. Because it looked like the right decision at the time. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of the State, President Obama was there, and we looked at the administration of Goodlatte Jonathan, the president. We looked at the fact that if they, at least the reasoning at the time, was that they designated Boko Haram a terrorist organization, it only strengthened them. I mean, there are so many human rights abuses there. There is so much corruption on both sides. I mean, the administration's army has gone into village after village and indiscriminately killed many, many Muslim young men. However, from where we are now, after the abduction of those girls, after I read foreign policy every morning, you see the Boko Haram just killing people in village after village after village. It looks like a mistake. And I'm glad that John Kerry and the administration now has designated them a terrorist organization. And I wish that President Jonathan had accepted our U.S. aid in the first day when it would have made a difference rather than a couple of weeks later.
Thank you. I don't know whether they should have designated them as a terrorist organization in the beginning, but it seems to me they are a terrorist group, and what they're doing needs to be responded to as a terrorist group. I just don't understand why they would have been worried about enhanced status rather than calling a terrorist group a terrorist group. And as Ambassador Beyer said, the aid should have been accepted to find those girls right away. And it's outrageous what's happened to them, and we need to do all we can in terms of offering assistance to bring them home.
We must bring our girls home. Women who are being captured just because they want an education, just because they want a better life. And we can't just use these as photo ops. We can't just stand up with signs that say, bring back our girls, or hashtags that say, bring back our girls. We have to really, really mean that and be concerned about the human rights of all people. Was it the right decision at that time? I don't know. But I know right now they absolutely are acting as a terrorist organization, and that's how they should be treated. So we need to pray for our girls, and we need to bring our girls back home.
All right, thank you very much. For this panel, do you believe Edward Snowden is a traitor or a hero? And what, if anything, should Congress do to increase oversight of intelligence services without compromising national security?
Well, this is a balance between security and privacy. And, you know, I do believe that the government should not be in the business of mass data collections. And I think data collection should only be conducted with a court order. I mean, whether he's a hero or a traitor, you know, I think history will judge. I think it certainly has opened up a lot of eyes in Congress. And, you know, even when you learn that the NSA is even spying on one of the Senate committees as being a significant concern. So I'm not ready to say whether he's a traitor or a hero. It might be somewhere in between, but I think he certainly has opened up a lot of people's eyes about what type of information that is being collected.
I agree. I don't think it's the ambassador says it's complicated, but no, I don't believe that he is a traitor or not. But I think what he has done is certainly presented us with a situation that we have a problem, we have a disconnect in our system, and that we need to fix it. And I think for all the things that just been said, that we're moving along those lines to make certain that we are not spending a lot of time and effort collecting data on every single American, every business, or even spying on a Senate, the U.S. Senate or a committee, but that we're doing all the right things to protect us in terms of international cybersecurity and all those other things that could cause us harm.
The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, and papers and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched, persons or things to be seized. The mass collection of information against hundreds of millions of Americans is blatantly unconstitutional. I said so when President Bush did it. I said so when President Obama did it. My TV show, those of you who've seen The Inside Scoop, begins with the president is spying on hundreds of millions of us. If only more people were watching my TV show, we wouldn't have needed Edward Snowden. This was not news to anyone who worked in Congress. I was in Congress on September 11th working for Barney Frank. We drafted the first draft of the Patriot Act. The good draft, the one that I helped write, protected civil liberties, and everyone agreed from Maxine Waters on the left to Lamar Smith on the right. Our version was thrown in the trash, and that's how we came up with this. Edward Snowden, he told us things that we should have already known about.
So I guess hero, traitor, we're kind of in the balance here.
I'm glad that someone said something. I wish it hadn't been in the way he did it. I think that there are legitimate ways to do whistleblowers. I've had whistleblowers on my show. I've had Agent Michael German. I've had Sibel Edmonds. What they did is they went through the chain of command. That's how you're supposed to do it. You tell your boss. You tell your boss's boss. Michael German, for example, he was a former FBI agent, and he discovered that the FBI had dropped the ball on the connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists. And they dropped the ball not because they wanted to help terrorists, but because they'd messed up some things, and they wanted to cover up their own bureaucratic mess up. And he went through the system. He went all the way up to the head of the FBI, the Inspector General. When they didn't listen, he went to a member of the Senate, Charles Grassley. And finally, when no one gave him the aid he needed, he went to the press. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it under the Whistleblower Protection Act, which I support. Edward Snowden didn't do it through proper channels. I wish he had, because it's a very important issue, but the way he did it is traitorous. But there was a right way to do it.
I see. Thank you. Back to some domestic issues here. If elected to Congress, would you support legislation, co-sponsored by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, that's been introduced to cancel the NFL team's trademark of the term Redskins as a way of forcing the owner to change the team's name?
I oppose that name, but I don't know that we should legislate the names of football teams, however offensive they are. We do have freedom of speech, and I would hope that we could pressure the team and its ownership and Dan Snyder to change the name on his own rather than take an act of Congress.
I don't think this should be an act of Congress, but I do think that there is a movement of the will of the people. Words do matter. There's a time in our history when certain words for African Americans were named, and it was offensive. We have evolved, so we don't say certain words anymore. And I'm hoping that that evolution is what's happening with the Washington, and we won't even use the word, we'll call it the R word. And but I think and I like Eleanor, she's a friend of mine, and I'm gonna help her with trying to get statehood for the district, but I wouldn't help her with the Constitution amendment or legislation in order to get the R name changed.
I agree with Senator Eben and my friend Laverne that the congressional legislation needs to be going a little too far, especially when we're balancing First Amendment rights. Obviously, the name needs to go. And we're going to love the team no matter what it's called. And I think we'll like it a lot more if we can put this behind us. But I do have 43 seconds left, and I want to tell you about the Poverty Commission. I spent 2 years with a bipartisan group of legislators going to the poorest neighborhoods in Virginia. And we listened and listened and listened, and 5 big things came up trying to lift people out of poverty. One is that women on welfare paid a 100% tax. If they went and earned $100 at McDonald's, we took $100 away from their welfare check. It was as regressive as you can possibly get. You had to have only one parent in the household. So we were driving the father out of the households in most cases. And there was no money for childcare, there was no money for training, and there was no money for transportation. We said, please lift yourself out of poverty, but we're not going to help you in any way. I'll continue later.
Okay. I don't know how to follow up on that. Hold on. Okay. On this panel here, the 2011 budget agreement between President Obama and Republicans has led to cuts in defense spending that by most accounts have hurt the Virginia economy. Would you support restoring some of those defense monies if savings could be found in other federal programs that also benefit Virginians? Or should Virginia learn to make do with decreased defense spending?
Bill, you're up.
Thank you. No, I would not. Well, first of all, I don't support the budget cuts. As a government contractor, myself, small business owner, I think and have performed a lot of work with the federal government over the past 25 plus years. We need to boost not only our local economy, but the U.S. economy by the federal government continue to spend and invest dollars wisely that sustain the economy and create jobs. Here in the Washington metropolitan area, and particularly in this district, we're heavily dependent upon not only the federal government, but the Department of Defense with its military installations and the men and women that serve our great country that are both active and retired that live in this region. We need to make certain that we continue to provide job opportunities, that contracting opportunities are there for them, and I would work with my colleagues in Congress and the Department of Defense and the White House to identify other ways to prevent further cuts.
You know what? There's good defense spending and there's bad defense spending. There's defense spending that we need to protect our country and protect our allies around the world, and there's thousands of tanks sitting in the desert in Arizona that we're not using. We don't need another tank. There was the second engine for the F-35 that was made in Speaker John Boehner's district, and the Pentagon said, you know, we don't need this engine. We already have this other engine, and they built this second engine that the Pentagon didn't want for many, many years because it was in Speaker Boehner's district. It was finally stopped. Look, I want to protect Virginia jobs, very much so, but I want to make sure those, and by the way, it's not F-35s and tanks that are made in Virginia, so I think we're okay on those two scores. But in general, when politicians are only protecting their parochial needs, we find that we have all across the country, we have a lot of things that we don't need. So yes, if it's needed, I will absolutely support Virginia jobs. I'll go to the mat. There's lots of things we need in Virginia, from infrastructure spending. We haven't gotten to that yet, expanding the metro. But if it's wasteful defense spending, I'm not going to support it.
Yeah, I mean, the 8th District does rely a tremendous amount, well, all of Virginia relies a tremendous amount on defense spending. And the cuts that were made through sequestration were drastic. And they were drastic because they actually thought that the people that were negotiating the deal would never not do a deal, because given that these cuts were looming. Well, surprise, surprise, the dysfunctional Congress let it slip anyway. A lot of the cuts have been smartly added. And in that, I mean that they were applied appropriately. I would not support revisiting these cuts. I would support more of a jobs program, more redirecting a lot of these jobs, some of these contracting jobs, towards more things like maybe healthcare, maybe it's green energy, environmental jobs. I talked earlier about supporting a billionaire's tax and millionaire's tax, where people are paying their fair share. We take that revenue and start putting people back to work on all sectors, the transit, the repairing our grid, our crumbling roads and bridges and things like that. So I would support keeping the cuts as they are.
You know, just to follow up, I guess how would you accomplish this? I mean, one problem right now is that in Congress, the defense appropriations is one side of the budget and the non-defense is another side. So how do you convince the very parochial nature of Congress, where just about every congressional district has its own little defense project, how do you convince them that they have to give up some of their pie in order to supply more funding to the non-defense side?
Well, I mean, I didn't say it would be easy, but we've got to show some leadership here. We've got to look at our entire budget and look at what's necessary and prioritize. And I do believe that we should start investing more in jobs. Look, I'm talking about when I say that we are having millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, that means more revenues coming in. Well, what do you do with that additional revenue? Well, I have some ideas. And I'm talking about rebuilding crumbling roads and bridges, start investing more in education. And it can be some more re-education of some of the people in the defense contracting industry. We have a lot of folks here that are in different types of industries in the defense. And they are in healthcare, they're environment, they're in other energy, they're in other different factors, and they can be reprogrammed and retrained to go into other sectors. But I think that we need to make more of an effort to rein in some of the spending on the defense side. But when I say bringing in more revenue, that's where we start investing in education. That's when we start investing in more jobs.
All right, thank you. For this panel, members of Congress next year are once again going to try to produce revenue-neutral tax reform by eliminating various tax preferences and loopholes. One of the biggest money losers for the U.S. Treasury is the home mortgage deduction, which costs $70 billion every year. Should that be put on the table? And if not, what loopholes would you propose eliminating instead?
We need tax reform. I think everybody, first of all, when you sit down to do your taxes, if you don't have help you're just lost. And the reform has to happen first by putting people back to work so that they have money to pay taxes. Then we need to make sure that the fair share is being paid by the people who are making the most. So there are not loopholes, but benefits and incentives to give to community organizations. You get a tax write-off. There are incentives to do things to make the community stronger. So we ought to do that. Most people, home ownership is the biggest asset that they do have. But they're taking money now because they've got to put their kids through school. I think that some of the interest rates that are out there now need to go down. Student loan interest rates needs to go down. So people need to make more money so that they can pay taxes, but the people who make the most should be the ones paying the most.
You ask hard questions. So absolutely not. But let's also recognize that home interest mortgage deduction is already limited. You can't take it on a second home, your beach home, your mountain home. It's limited, I believe, to $500,000 or $600,000 in the mortgage. So the billionaires with the mansions, most of their home interest is not deductible already. And let's remember that the essence of the American dream is your home, is to own it. And so we would really move America away from home ownership, which, by the way, is, I think, the lowest from the 29 to 35-year-olds it's been in years and years and years, decades and decades. I do think that there are, as we look at the tax extenders, there are good things we should extend and there are bad. I would love to see the R&D tax credit for research and development made permanent. Right now, businesses don't know if they can do R&D again and again because it's going to expire every 2 years. On the other hand, I believe we give oil companies about $4 billion a year in the oil depletion allowance. We are the #1 nation in the world in our fossil fuel subsidies. This is something we could change. Also mentioned earlier, I'm from a national carbon tax. That would go a long way to help pay for a lot of this.
I would support taxing capital gains at a higher rate than income taxes, similar to the pre-Reagan years. And that's a fair loophole to eliminate. We have to eliminate loopholes on corporations that offshore jobs. Those are the kind of loopholes we need to eliminate. The only one that I would consider regarding mortgages would be on the price of the mortgage above the most expensive home in the 8th District.
Well, there have been some people that have proposed, for instance, a cap on how much you could deduct. You could deduct $30,000 or 20, no more than $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 in interest a year. Was that something that is?
I think that's reasonable. I think that's not too far from where we are right now. The number may adjust, but already, if you have a $750,000 mortgage, which many people in the 8th District, in fact, do, the differential between whatever the cap is, 500, 600, and the above, is not deductible now. And it's fine to move the cap down if we need to work on it with the budget. We can do that in a variety of ways.
Right. I mean, do you think it's, revenue neutral tax reform is actually the way to go? I mean, that seems to be the only possible route to getting changes in tax reform. Is a number of people on both panels have talked about raising taxes on millionaires and billionaires, which, frankly, when the Republicans are in control of Congress, would be a heavy lift. So that's why I was trying to look for other ways that you might actually change the revenue mix. But the issue is when the bottom line is revenue neutral, that means you're not raising more money. It just means you're changing the preferences. And I don't know if anyone here wants to say whether or not there's a loophole that they would.
Oh, absolutely. The biggest loophole that I see is all the corporations that are moving jobs offshore. Apple Corporation, and I don't mean to pick on Apple because they all do it, so it's not distinct to Apple alone, but there are $2 trillion that are being held offshore because corporations know that if they bring the money home, then they're going to be taxed on it. There's an incentive in our law to take the money overseas and the jobs along with it. That doesn't make any sense to me. What I would do is I would reward the ones who bring jobs and money back in, and I would punish the ones that go offshore. If companies want to sell here, then they should pay our taxes. I mean, this is the biggest. There's a reason why corporations used to pay a very large share of U.S. income taxes. Today, they pay very little. In fact, 2/3 of corporations, including major corporations, pay no taxes at all. So what we need to do is make sure that we reward the ones that bring the jobs here and not the ones that bring it overseas. I get rid of the hedge fund loophole, the oil company loophole, the jet plane loophole. There's a lot of loopholes for rich people I get rid of.
You know, we deal with this in Virginia all the time. We have loopholes that Steven Spielberg for the movie tax. We got all kinds of oil and gas type loopholes. But certainly at the state level, I mean, I disagree with you, Don, with all due respect, on lifting the cap. I think this punishes lower income and middle income Americans. I wouldn't lift the cap at all. I mean, there's a lot of people living in, especially where we live, that depend on the mortgage tax, and I would not cap it at all. But yeah, offshore loopholes. You remember when Romney ran for president? You know, his percentage that he paid compared to what the rest of us probably in this room paid. I mean, I would go after that kind of loophole too. There's a lot of corporations, big corporations, that are paying no taxes whatsoever. And so those are the people that I would go after, but I don't look at the mortgage deduction as a loophole at all. So many lower income and middle income Americans depend on that every single day. No, I would not cap it, and no, I would not cap it at all.
And I agree. I would not cap it at all. As a matter of fact, just when we adopted a local budget a couple of weeks ago, we had this whole discussion about whether, excuse me, we were going to continue with the senior tax relief, and we actually now offer a program for senior rent relief, because the cost of housing and affordability of housing has risen so much in this area that we need to make certain that everyone has, irrespective of your income level, that everyone has an opportunity to not only have home ownership, but have decent housing, and we need to make certain that housing is affordable, available across various income spectrums. In terms of revenue neutral, I agree with the statements that have already been offered relative to corporations offshore, whether it's capital gains taxes and increasing those and so forth. But what we really need to be doing is spending a lot of time and effort to generate revenue through looking at new innovations in technology and research and development.
All right, thank you. For this panel, Governor McAuliffe, Senator Kaine, and Senator Warner have all expressed support for offshore drilling in Virginia. Do you agree with their position?
I do not. Perhaps sometime in the future when it has been demonstrably shown that there's not an environmental danger, but in the short run, I think the environmental danger is far too great. And I also think that once again, we move in the wrong direction. We need to be moving away from fossil fuels. We need to be investing much more in solar and wind and every form of renewable energy. I hate to harken back to a carbon tax, but if we could go to $15 or $25 per ton of carbon dioxide, we would get people to buy more fuel-efficient cars, to buy different houses, to live in different places, to make all the alternative forms of energy much more economically desirable. And I think it's much like the Keystone Pipeline. Not only is it symbolically wrong, it's this fundamental move in the wrong direction. By the way, for Bill and Patrick, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the mortgage interest deduction is already capped for people, and it wouldn't affect the lower income people at all. It would only affect people that are living in very expensive houses.
I don't support a lifting of the, I don't support offshore drilling off Virginia or off anywhere else. I think, as Don said, renewable energy, green jobs is what we need to be looking at. You know, if we just wanted to drill for oil and look for fossil fuels and pollute this environment and encourage climate change, we would have quite a few years of doing that. But we need to be focused on the opposite. We need to be investing in new jobs, research and development for clean energy, things like solar roadways that can actually capture solar energy, storing solar energy. These are the things we need to be looking at, not finding more fossil fuels to burn and pollute.
I agree. I disagree with Senator Warner and Kaine for offshore drilling, so I agree with my colleagues here. We need a healthy world. We need to protect our resources here in Virginia. We need to incentivize universities, partnerships with companies and corporations to find new solar energy, to do things more green, but incentivize that. That's where we need to be putting dollars. But offshore drilling, I disagree. I think here in Virginia, we want to protect our resources.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Don, just to follow up on the mortgage interest deduction, I'm pretty sure there isn't a cap on the amount of interest you can deduct on your mortgage. There is a cap on how much capital gains you can take when you sell your house. but I'm not familiar with a cap on your mortgage. And
Glenn, you may be right, but I'm going to call my accountant tonight because my mortgage is more than $600,000.
Okay, very good. For this panel, in combating climate change, what do you think of a proposal known as carbon fee and dividend, in which fees are imposed on fossil fuels and greenhouse gases, but then those fees are returned to the American public in the form of an equal per-person monthly dividend check? This is a proposal that particularly has caught some fancy in California.
Mark, you're first. Yep.
I support that. I mean, it's actually cap and trade plus is what that is. This is cap and trade, which economists have long supported, which basically says that there's a carbon tax, but you can trade it, and that way people who want to pay a lot to pollute can do that, but that's because they're doing valuable things. But the best part about the fee and dividend system is that people get the money back. So it's not a question of simply adding a tax, which could fall on people, but actually get the money back. And the people who are misusing it and causing a lot of fossil fuel problems and global warming, they're the ones paying the most. But I want to be clear here. I want to move away from fossil fuels. And if we actually tax not just carbon, but the full impact of coal companies, we'd probably price them out of business, which is just okay with me. They're doing mountaintop bombing in West Virginia. They're blowing up mountains. They're raining toxins like arsenic, cadmium, selenium into our rivers. And so it's not just carbon that they're putting in the air. They're also damaging our water. And that's the kind of taxes we have to make them to pay for what they do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're all going to agree on this, but certainly the climate change is probably one of the most critical issues that we're facing. And I think the carbon fee, or the so-called cap and trade plus out in California, is a good alternative. I think still the best way to do it is through a carbon tax. But this is something of great concern to our economy, because you're looking at droughts now regionally. Well, what if we saw a drought that was over our entire nation? What would that do to the cost of produce that we all got and purchased? But speaking on caps, I just want to clarify, when you talked about the caps on corporate loopholes and things like that, they're not just talking about caps on mortgage deductions. They're talking about caps that would include charity that a lot of people give. I save for college for my children, and they're also talking that as being part of the cap. So this would be one of the more regressive type things that we do. I would oppose any type of set and cap, and I would support, back to this question, the carbon fee, what they're doing out in California. That would certainly be better than what we have, certainly.
This is a discussion that, as a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, that we've had over the past several years, and I'm pleased and proud of the fact that I've signed on to a resolution to support this type of initiative with cap and trade. Certainly we need to, and we must create and innovate a cleaner energy future, and we can do that by combating pollution and climate change through any number of energy sources. We need to be cleaner about what we do and not dirtier. I'm pleased and proud of the fact that in my city of Alexandria, we were one of the first jurisdictions in the entire region to move to become an eco-city. We had implemented a eco plan, and one of the things that I'm most proud of to demonstrate our commitment to going green and protecting the environment is the free trolley that we run up and down the heart of King Street in Old Town, from the rivers to the Metro Rail station at King Street. And that trolley has carried over 3.6 million passengers to date. Keep them out of their cars.
All right, thank you. For this panel, the FCC today put out for comment a net neutrality proposal in which broadband providers would be able to hold to a minimum level of quality for any service, but otherwise they were required to adhere to commercially reasonable, end quote, standards. Do you favor the idea of making content providers pay more for faster internet speeds?
Adam, I think you're up, aren't you?
I support net neutrality. I don't support asking content providers to pay more to use the internet. The internet should be a free and open marketplace of ideas. And we can't let big telecom companies decide what we get to see and access online. So no, I don't support increases to get information to people. The internet is a resource that's helped this world and helped kids across this country. And I don't support it.
I did, and I was surprised at the FCC vote. I think that internet is another weapon in terms of making equal access to education for so many. So it would be disproportionately poor people, minority people who would not have full access. Speed is important. Getting the information is important. Our young people are growing up in a global society. They need to have access. We need to make it more accessible and less cost. I think the cost of doing this type of technology is going down, but yet we're looking to charge more. So I absolutely do not want to see a rich and poor versus who gets technology, who has access to it, and who does not. I think that would increase the education achievement gap, not eliminate it.
I just want to say I love the internet. And I think Ben Cerf should be nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm proud that our dealership was the second dealership in the country to have its own website back in 1991. And I am very much for net neutrality and strongly supported, with the support of my children, the original congressional bid for net neutrality. And I was disappointed when the courts threw it out. I do think Tom Wheeler and the FCC have tried to do a responsible thing with the law as it is now. However, I think it comes back to us. One of us will be in Congress to find legislation in Congress that will restore net neutrality. You know, one of my favorite ideas is that most communication is asymmetric. It's mother and child, or boss and worker, or moderator and poor panelist. And yet the internet, for the first time, makes communication symmetrical. If you kill net neutrality, it makes it asymmetric again. It's the rich have it and the poor can't. So we need net neutrality.
All right, we're good to go.
All right. This panel will get one more foreign policy question. The Palestinian Authority has formed a unity government with Hamas, which has led to the breakdown in peace talks pursued so vigorously by the Obama administration. Should U.S. aid be halted to the Palestinian Authority, or, as Jimmy Carter argued this week in the Washington Post, should the United States view the unity government as an opportunity for a broader peace deal?
Patrick, I think you're first.
Well, I mean, I think that this is Palestine and Israel obviously is one of the more important things happening right now in the Middle East, and certainly one of them. And I support a two-state solution decided between the two countries coming together. But it should be fair, it should be equitable, and we want to make sure that it ensures the long-term sovereignty and the safety of both Israel and Palestine. Now, to be sure, I think the United States does have a crucial role to play in this. I mean, I did state that I think that both of the countries should come to these conclusions and where the lines are drawn together. But I think the United States has a role to bring the two sides together. It's hard to act on a group that has been considered to be a terrorist, and this is a complex situation. But I do support a two-state solution and the two parties coming together to decide what the country should be divided.
A viable and politically independent Palestine state must be the cornerstone of a peaceful and prosperous Middle East. To that end, the United States must continue to engage diplomatically with leaders in Israel and Palestine Authority to make a Palestine government more than just an abstract notion. And I'm pleased that in my conversations with the APEC recently, that they're comfortable with my position and support with Israel. And but I honestly believe that we should continue to use diplomatic measures to reach an accord between both those countries.
The question was whether we reduce aid to the Palestinian Authority for making a deal with Hamas. First of all, we have to understand who Hamas is. Hamas is not just a terrorist organization that has frequently shot rockets into Israel and trying to kill as many civilians as possible. It's also dedicated to killing Jews all over the world. Hamas, it's not just Jews. Hamas is very, very dangerous to the Arabs, to the Palestinians who live in Gaza. It's one of the least free places on earth. There's no free press. There's no free government. People are regularly tortured, yes, and murdered. So I was very sorry to see the Palestinian Authority join with Hamas. If Hamas were to change its stripes, you know, I guess the zebra would have to change the stripes, but anything's possible. Then we could talk about them and jointly and so forth. But the Palestinian Authority is a mess. Mahmoud Abbas has been in power 5 years after his term ended. When you talked about aid to Egypt, I do not like aiding governments that support dictatorship. I want to help the Palestinian Authority, but once they join with Hamas, I think we have to look at reduction of aid.
I'm sorry, you were the buzzword. You would reduce aid?
I think we look at reduction of aid. I wouldn't end it completely because I want the Palestinian Authority. There are many people under Abbas that do many good things. I would try to use aid as an encouragement to do the right thing. I would do the same thing in Egypt. So I think it's not an on aid or off aid. I think it's a reduction. You use it as a lever of power to try to encourage them to either make Hamas better or to basically, because there's more freedom in the Palestinian Authority, there's more freedom in the West Bank than there is in Gaza. I want to reward them, but they're joining with Hamas.
Right, so it doesn't sound like anyone over there thought like the Jimmy Carter idea. Right? Okay, all right, just wanted to confirm that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to change the format here just a little bit. The candidates, of course, know this is coming. Some of them have used self-help already, but we wanted to give each panel an opportunity to answer a question that they were not asked. So you could choose a question on this side of your choice that was asked of this panel and vice versa. We'll just start down on the end with Bill.
I don't remember all the questions.
That was part of the test, Bill.
Wow. Yeah, that's right, the offshore drilling. I certainly would, in Virginia, I certainly would not support my wonderful U.S. senators or the governor, Terry McAuliffe, in their efforts to advocate for that. I just think that's the wrong thing to do, again, in terms of protecting the environment, climate change, everything else. We need to be looking at other sources to generate additional options for providing fuel sources for our nation, but certainly offshore drilling in Virginia is not the way to go.
I also do not support offshore drilling in Virginia or anywhere in the country. There's a dirty little secret about offshore drilling, and that is that there's more than enough land already given to them offshore, to the oil companies, to last us for about 30 years. These permits that they're seeking wouldn't even go into effect. They wouldn't even start the drilling for 30 years. I realize that we're going to be on fossil fuels for a few more years to come, but I hope after 30 years we can be done with them. Fossil fuels are not only causing global warming and the melting of the ice caps in the Arctic and the Antarctic and Greenland, frankly, they're bad as a weapon of foreign policy. We have all these dictators that have all this oil, and so there's a reason why Germany's afraid of Russia right now, because Russia has all their oil. We need to get away from fossil fuels, and there are ways to do that. We need to help green energy, solar, geothermal, and wind power. Michael Mann, noted climatologist, has endorsed my campaign because he recognizes that I've looked at all the ways to help and bring renewable energies to the fore. We can reduce climate change. Offshore drilling is a step in the wrong direction.
Your first question of the evening, I believe, was how would you fix the Affordable Care Act? And I'm a healthcare attorney. I've been in healthcare policy for the last 20 years. And this is something, the Affordable Care Act is something that I've been pushing for the last 20 years. Try to get as close as we can to achieving universal health care. But even after we expand the Affordable Care Act with Medicaid and through private insurance in the marketplace, there's still going to be 20 million Americans who are uninsured. My very first bill as your member of Congress that I put in will be bringing those 20 million back into the healthcare system, and I do it in two ways. Free preventive care for people, especially those with chronic diseases, help them manage their chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes, asthma. Those are the most expensive chronic diseases out there. Give free preventive care for people to make sure that they can be healthy and know how to stay healthy, manage their disease. But also catastrophic loss. You develop cancer or have a heart attack. The last thing you need to worry about is going to financial bankruptcy. And that will save the money. I think Paul Ryan will like that. The CBO will score it as a savings.
Adam?
I would like to answer the question about Edward Snowden, hero or traitor. We can't call him a hero with the release of the information he had, but I want to go further and talk about the USA Freedom Act from Congressman Sensenbrenner and Senator Leahy, H.R. 3361 or Senate Bill 1599. We have to end the unwarranted bulk collection of data on Americans who have not posed a threat to our government. We need to increase the transparency of the FISA court. We need to end the spying investigate the spying from the New York City Police Department on citizens in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. We need to keep Americans safe but not violate the Constitution. Edward Snowden should have been testifying before Congress as a whistleblower, not doing what he did.
I don't find myself agreeing with Jimmy Carter on the Mideast very much. But I think he has a point here, and I would deny reducing funding to the West Bank over the potential reconciliation with Hamas. Yes, Hamas's constitution is awful. Yes, we cannot negotiate with terrorists. Yes, Hamas has to come around away from this denial of the right of Israel to exist. But I'm an optimist, which is why I'm running. I thought the tea leaves, when Hamas reached out to the PLO to work together, was the first sign that they may be willing to move. Clearly, they're not going to convince the West Bank, the Palestinian Liberation Authority, to call for the destruction of Israel. They've already agreed to a two-state solution. We can only work out the deal. And we also know that a two-state solution that only includes the West Bank is never going to endure. It has to include the West Bank and Gaza ultimately. So, trust and verify. You have to move forward. But I hope this is a good sign. And obviously, we're not going to negotiate until Hamas does give it up. But I hope this is a good first step, and let's not torpedo it.
One of the questions you asked them was about the budget and the Republicans and Democrats being so different on points. How are we going to get anything done? And when I've been out talking to voters, the issues come up, but the consistent thread has been the dysfunction, the gridlock, why we aren't looking each other in the eye, talking about the values that we have. And that's what I think is going to be necessary, is that we turn down the tone and temperature, that we start talking about the values that we all hold important, the values of human rights, the values of equal pay for equal work, the values around you want the society to be the best that it can be, you want a healthy economy. So I think when we come together, just as I did working with the Urban League, bringing together corporations, businesses, universities to get things done, that's how I think we're going to move forward.
Thank you very much. Those have been fascinating answers. We've come to the closing statement portion of our evening. We're going to do this in reverse order from the order in which we did opening statements. Each candidate's going to have 2 minutes, obviously, to address an issue of your choice or to say whatever it is you want to say to our audience, although we would be interested in knowing, if you could work this in, whether you consider yourself more of a Hillary Clinton Democrat or an Elizabeth Warren Democrat.
I am proudly an Elizabeth Warren Democrat. I love Hillary Clinton. I've worked with her as well. This is no knock on Hillary Clinton, but my role model is definitely Elizabeth Warren. Thank you, Rip. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient tonight. I'll tell you why Elizabeth Warren is my role model. Because she thinks outside the box. She's not only really smart, but she's tough, and she thinks about ways to help people that aren't necessarily the same solutions. My boss, Barney Frank, was aggressive, yes. He was progressive, yes. But he was also very, very effective because he knew how to work behind the scenes to get things done. And sometimes the best way to work behind the scenes is if they know that if they don't work with you, you're going to go out in the media and you're going to call them out, which Barney Frank did all the time. Many of you know I've done hundreds of TV shows and thousands of radio shows. I'm not afraid to call them out. But I also know that you can work with them quietly behind the scenes. And I try to think outside the box. I'll give you a couple examples. One of them that many of you know about is my education plan to actually reduce college costs. Currently, we give more money to colleges the more they increase their costs. And then we wonder why college rates have tripled after inflation in the last 30 years. I would reverse that. I would give money to the colleges that lower their cost and take away from the for-profit institutions. And that way, that reallocation of funds, the best part about it is I go to the Congressional Budget Office, they score it as a big zero, and that's why we can get Republican support. So I'm looking at ways to do things that are aggressive and progressive, but also ways that we can get Republican support. I've worked behind the scenes. I know how Congress works. I have many friends in Congress. I've worked with Hillary Clinton. I've worked with Joe Biden. I've worked with the members of the Judiciary Committee. If I joined the Judiciary Committee, they know me by name. We are ready to go. I studied under Barney Frank. He was my mentor. He was one of the most effective members of Congress. A lot of my opponents do great work in Richmond. I hope they stay in Richmond, do a really good job, and bring me to Washington. I'm ready to go. Thank you.
You're allowed to clap if you want to at this point.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Rip. And thank you to everyone for just joining and staying with us on this. It's been a long process. You know, everyone up here is qualified to be your next member of Congress, and I mean that very sincerely. But we do have differences, and I try to point some of those out today. I mean, I think the media hasn't written a whole lot about this because they want to see some differences, and I hope we saw some this evening. You know, this race for me in this campaign, I think, should be about the heart and soul of the Democratic Party in the 8th District. And I'll tell you, it comes down to 4 questions, four words. Who do you trust? Who do you trust that is going to stand up for the middle class, for lower income Americans? You know, the 8th District may be the wealthiest in the entire nation. It's certainly up there. We're the wealthiest district. But we have a lot of people in poverty. When I go knocking on doors, I talk to people that are been unemployed since 2009. People that are collecting SSI, disability insurance, has only seen it gone up $20 in the last 4 years. And they're angry. They're angry at the president. They're angry at Congress. How are you supposed to live with only a $20 increase in the last 4 years? Everything else has gone up that we do. So many people are hurting. We need to have someone there that's going to stand up for those people. You know, there's people go to bed at night, some are Republicans, dreaming of a grand bargain. There's certainly going to be some entitlement reform. If you're a senior citizen, someone living depending on Social Security and Medicare, you're a retiree, military retiree, federal employee, who do you trust that's going to say no, that's going to stand up for your rights, going to stand up and say absolutely not, people paid into the system, they should be eligible for every last entitlement. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand up for those middle class. So I pledge to you, I will vote against any effort to reduce those benefits. Please join me on June the 10th and join me for a new generation of progressive leadership. I ask for your vote.
Don, I think you're next. Don.
Thank you.
Adam, I think Don is next. Don is next.
Just to wrap up quickly on welfare reform, you know, the Poverty Commission had these 5 very important structural changes. The 2 were structural, was we changed in that law the 100% tax on welfare mothers, and we changed in the law that the father had to leave the home to qualify for welfare. The other 3 were budget items. We funded in that 94-95 or 95-96 budget child care money, training money, and transportation money. As my good friends who serve in Richmond know, no General Assembly can bind future General Assemblies, and I'm sorry that it's not funded now. Politics is the art of the possible. We funded it when we could. By the way, I'm a Hillary Clinton Democrat. I betrayed her once for Barack Obama. I'm not going to do it a second time. And she was my boss when I was ambassador, and she was the most gracious of bosses and a very good Secretary of State. Thank you all for inviting me here this evening. My mother and father actually grew up on farms in McLean. They weren't farmers. Their parents were all new dealers. So I'm a biological Democrat. And I have been taught from birth to work for poor, for workers, for those who suffer from discrimination and hatred. And I was always trying to address the challenges that we have before us. To be a change agent, to be a leader. So I'm going to fight to raise the minimum wage. I will always protect a woman's right to choose. I will fight for new gun safety laws, and I will celebrate all that Obamacare has already done for millions of Americans. And I will be the strongest voice I can be for climate change. We all have good candidates in this race. There are differences. I was lieutenant governor for 8 years with Doug Wilder and George Allen, and made the real difference in the lives of families in poverty, of those with disabilities, and of the victims of sexual assault. I've grown a business right here in Northern Virginia. In fact, today is my 40th anniversary at Don Bayer Volvo. And in that, we've created hundreds of jobs, served millions of customers, millions to hundreds of thousands of customers, and really invested deeply in the community. And I was proud when the president asked me to be his ambassador in Switzerland. Proven experience, tested leadership. Please vote for me on June 10th.
Okay. Thank you, Grainsville Dems. Thank you, Providence Democrats. Fairfax YD's Glenn and Rip. Now, I am Adam Eben, and I want to answer one important question. Patrick Hope, you know you can trust me. And you can too. Now, for 11 years, I've been representing Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria as an effective member of the General Assembly. And I'm an Elizabeth Warren Democrat, and I think that's why last week Keith Ellison, the Congressional co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, endorsed my candidacy. Now, I'm not the flashiest, I'm not the loudest, and as I said, I'm not going to make the loftiest promises. But for more than a decade, I've passed progressive legislation in a hostile and dysfunctional Richmond. I repealed the hybrid tax. I worked with Governor Kane to see that new state buildings met green standards. I expanded Medicaid for immigrant mothers. That's prepared me for Congress, where I will pass progressive legislation in another hostile and dysfunctional environment. It's important to get things done there, and I think I can start to repair the institution. In Congress, together, we can address climate change aggressively. We can reduce economic inequality, including raising the minimum wage. We can get a real raise for federal workers. We can protect and expand Obamacare. We can fight against the Ryan budget and never forget the promise of Social Security and Medicare. Now, it was 11 years ago I was elected to the House, and there were lots of things that no one thought possible. They didn't think that I'd be able to deliver a $1.5 billion matching program with the federal government for Metro. I want to protect that on Capitol Hill. They wouldn't have thought that I could protect workers from fraud and abuse. They wouldn't have thought that we could expand the Adult Protective Services Act. If you stand with me on June 10th, I will stand for you in the United States Congress, and there is no telling what we can accomplish together.
Again, thank you for having us here tonight. And you notice that the moderator asked Hillary Clinton or Elizabeth Warren, two women who have the opportunity to be president in 2016. I love Hillary Clinton, but I love some of Elizabeth Warren's practical things that she wants us to do, lowering interest rates for kids for college debt, the Postal Service being a lending institution instead of payday lenders. So both of the gals would do a great job. I think the challenges that we have now need a new perspective, a fresh perspective, and I just think the time is right for a leader who has run effective organizations and has a track record of putting our progressive values into action in the community to make it stronger. As a native here, I understand what it takes for a working class family to make a living and have economic stability. As the daughter of a 30-year postal employee, I understand how important it is to stand up for our federal employees and not let the government be shut down ever again. It's time for a woman to talk about the decisions that we make with our doctors should be just between our doctors, and the government, our employees, should have nothing to do with it. It's time for a leader who believes in equal pay, but also increasing capital so that men and women can be employers and not just employees. The time is right for leadership that will engage the will of the people to find common sense solutions like background checks for to decrease gun violence. People say, well, you don't lack political experience. We put a political organizer, community organizer in the White House. We can put a community leader in the U.S. House. I want to represent you in the U.S. House. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you this evening and to answer your questions. My name is Bill Ewell. Again, I am native Alexandrian, born and raised there. I was raised by a single mom in public housing, and my mother had to work a couple of jobs to make a living in order for us to survive. But I survived. I overcame the odds, and I helped her, and not only her, but myself, by not only delivering the local newspaper, working in a car wash, working in a restaurant, but to do things that would help the family survive. But it's about me making a difference to help not just myself, but others. I'm a caring individual. I have a track record and a performance record of making certain that no one is left behind. I inspire you, I uplift you. I am the only candidate that's served as an elected mayor, just like Jim Moran was before he got elevated to the U.S. Congress. And I'm proud of the fact that I have a record of proven results in getting things done. I want to go to Capitol Hill to be your next congressperson because I have the experience, the leadership, I have the passion. I'm a workaholic, and I want to make certain that I continue delivering and providing the constituent services that I have been doing as an effective mayor for the past 13 years, not to mention my prior 9 years on the city council. I first got appointed to the school board at the age of 24, served 10 long years on the school board, started a business, and then got into politics on the city council. And I say all this to just simply say that if I can overcome the odds and do all the things to make my life better, but others' lives better as well, and improve the quality of life for residents in the city of Alexandria, I want to continue to do those very same things as your representative in Congress, just as Jim Moran has done. I'm a good listener, I'm a consensus builder, but more importantly, I'm accessible, and that's what you'd like to see in your next congressperson. I ask for your vote on June 10th.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a couple little wrap-up items. First off, in the better late than never category, I'm told Marcus Simon has joined us. Marcus, are you here? Delegate Simon? There he is. Welcome. I know you all will join me in thanking Glenn Kessler. What a terrific job. I want to thank all of our candidates. It is an embarrassment of riches. It's really terrific, and not surprising, but terrific that the 8th District can produce this kind of talent. And on behalf of the Drainesville and Providence Dems and the young Dems, I want to thank you all for putting yourselves out there and offering yourselves for public service. I want to thank all of you for showing up on a rainy evening. God only knows what awaits us when we go outside tonight. Drive carefully. Thank you for being here. There is an important election coming up on June 10th. We do hope that tonight has helped in terms of airing some differences maybe, helping you make up your mind as to who you're going to vote for on June 10th.